Hey everyone, welcome to the online program of Amrita Civil Service Academy. My name is CB Joy, and as part of our Mains Master Program 2020, in this video, we'll be having the answer discussion of test number 7 on questions on Indian society. So without any delay, we'll just go inside the question. Now the question is, there is both an element of change and continuity to the Indian way of life since the arrival of globalization on her shores. Discuss. I'll repeat it. There is both an element of change and continuity to the Indian way of life since the arrival of globalization on her shores. Discuss. So it talks about globalization. The major theme is about globalization. So when we are writing this answer, we'll be breaking it up into the intro, body and conclusion parts. So going up with that, the core theme of it is globalization. So in the intro part, we must be addressing what is globalization in the first part. That should be the definition. Go for any working definition. You can refer your books, you can refer the key. There is a definition of globalization in it. Go for it. Once globalization is defined, your introduction does not end over there. You need to address the second part, which is there is an element of change and continuity to the Indian way of life since the arrival of globalization on her shores. So you need to mention that globalization has a link with the continuity and change in Indian way of life. So we'll be going into that in detail. So I'm just saying what it should be there in the introduction. In the body, you must say like what is globalization, how maybe just a small 2 or 3 line a point or a small paragraph saying how globalization occurred in India. What was the major reason or how the evolution of globalization in India. Just note it is for just 2 or 3 lines. It is just to give a thrust inside the main part of the answer. So a small thrust towards it, and from that we will be going inside the main part of the answer, in which we will be talking about how globalization has brought an element of change. That will be one major part of the answer. And then you will be saying how globalization has brought a element of continuity. Despite globalization, there is an element of continuity in the Indian way of life. So we'll be assessing the change brought about by globalization. We'll be assessing the continuity of the Indian way of life since even despite globalization happening. We'll be assessing both of them in the main body. Following that, we'll be talking about, in the conclusion, we'll be talking about the way forward or case studies in which we can, we can overcome the deficiencies globalization has caused, or we can overcome the deficiencies in which the non-globalization has caused. We'll be talking about both of them. We'll be wrap it up with that, and then we'll write a conclusion and end it on a positive note always, and then that is there for the answer. So understand this answer is for 10 marks, 150 words. You have 2 sides to write it. So let's not go too much elaborate points. So we have ample sufficient points. We'll go inside it now. So in the intro part, we'll be talking about the definition. The definition of globalization. What is globalization? So if you're going for the definition, you can say globalization is the integration of countries with uninterrupted flow of goods and services, labor and capital. That is what you can say in globalization. You can, that's a simple working definition of it. And you can say that India has actually it has occurred over the last few decades. So with that definition, your first part is done. In the second part, you can link it. How do you link it? India's policies changed, especially with the liberalization, privatization, globalization. With the new industrial policy of 1991, India accepted globalization, and from that there was an element of change. At the same time, certain elements continue towards the in the Indian way of life. You can mention that. You can say what is globalization? You can say globalization has brought change like increasing standards of living, while at the same time rural poverty is still continuing. You can say that. You can just make a link with the second part, identifying the change and identifying the still continuing thing. You can talk about rural poverty. Just a small connection is more than enough. You can just say globalization has brought about change while it has still reinforced certain, while it has still not penetrated certain barriers in Indian society. You can say that. That is something you can say. So first, again, let me repeat the introduction. You define globalization, and then you link it with the second part, saying how globalization has brought in a change in the increasing incomes and better way of living, but it has not yet penetrated certain areas like the rural areas, where still it's in the pre-globalization era. You can just finish off your introduction by that. It's a very good introduction. You will have 2-3 lines. You must not, I won't insist that you write what I said as such. Just understand, you have to mention where globalization has made a change and where it has not made a change. Just mention it, link it together, your introduction is done. What about your body? When you're going for the body, you need to understand, give a small, let me tell you, let me again insist, it should be a very small addendum, or a, a small, it's kind of like a bridge. You just can't jump inside that. You just need to say how globalization happened in India. Since it's a 10-mark question, 2 or 3 lines will be sufficient. Just say it out. Globalization happened since the new industrial policy of 1991. The new policy brought in globalized reforms. India became a member of the WTO, and globalization happened in India. That's it. That's more than enough. Before that, we had a mixed economy, and after 1991, we had a globalized economy, or globalized open economy. That's more than enough. That should give you a proper thrust inside the major part of the question, which is, we'll take it from the question, we'll take the heading from the question itself. It is element of change. Element of change. What is the element of continuity? You can talk about the different changes that has come up in India because of the different globalized economy, because we've opened our doors and shows to globalization. You can talk about all that. You can just look at the key. We've talked about always think in multiple dimensions. What about the political angle? What is the social angle? What is the economic angle? What is the scientific angle? What is the technological angle? What is the environmental angle? What is the legal angle? So we can talk about all of this. So mainly you can talk about, in the element of change, one core part we can talk about is economy. There has been an increasing number of jobs, especially in the service sector, because of globalization. Because of the increasing number of services, the demand for services and Indians who are employed in such services has grown tremendously because of globalization. That is a change that has come up. Another thing you can say is telecommunication or technology. With the advent of globalization, technology and the technological boom that has followed, we have internet, Wi-Fi, broadband connection, the major service providers like Vodafone, Jio, BSNL, all of them have grown tremendously, and this has actually boosted India's position. So you can talk about the technological angle. In the social angle, you can talk about many things. You can talk about the cuisine, you can talk about dressing, you can talk about tourism. The way we dress, the way we partake in our food, the way tourism is happening, there has been a larger influence of Western lifestyle, especially with regards to food. There are more McDonald's, there are more Domino's pizza coming up in major cities and tier 1 and tier 2 cities of India. So there's a change in cuisine. Dressing, again, there's a change. There's more pants and shirts being worn, suits being worn for formal meetings, conferences. There has been a change in that too. Tourism, again, we've started travel. More Indians are traveling abroad in search of tourists for tourist and recreation activities. So India has actually opened all its borders in this, and that has been a large change of life in all of the cases. The tourism sector has grown tremendously in India with this. So as part of our economy, we can also say, we can add about FDI. FDI has grown tremendously in India, and that has also led to more creation of more jobs. These are certain points you can say about. And on the front of technology, you can talk about e-commerce. You can talk about e-commerce, Amazon, Flipkart, Walmart, all of this has come up. That is also an advantage of technology. That is also an advantage of globalization. Whatever is needed, you can buy something from US, you can buy something from Europe, you can buy something from Latin America. All of that would reach India just by ordering it online through an application or through a website. It would come. That is the impact of globalization. So there has been a change. We've diversified our markets, we've diversified our supply chains, we've improved the logistics, and we've brought in a lot of change. So all of these are points. You can talk about transport, you can talk about logistics, you can talk about economy, in that jobs specifically, FDI specifically. In technology, you can talk about e-commerce, you can talk about the digital revolution. In social, you can talk about the cuisine, you can talk about the dress, you can talk about tourism. You have 9 points, more than enough points to write about element of change. Write the major points at the top, followed by the peripheral points. Then, what about the element of continuity? One major thing you can say is the majority and the advantage of globalization has been restricted to urban India. It has not percolated to the rural India that much. While telecommunication has somewhat percolated, the rural poverty is still present. Poverty in rural area is still very high. Primordial identities, social issues like religion, caste, still pervade many parts of India despite the impact of globalization. Despite the wide values which are being exchanged between the urban India and the rest of the world, rural India is still suffering from this. Agriculture still remains very, very poor in India. The share of agriculture to the GDP has actually fallen. It's now just around 15% to the entire GDP of the country. So that has also affected it. The farm distress is still happening. Farmer distress is occurring. You can say that as part of your agriculture. And apart from that, the urban rural divide. The urban rural divide. I don't know whether it's visible over here, but there's the urban rural divide, the large inequalities which is increasing day by day because of despite globalization. The inequalities are increasing, the urban rural divide is increasing. This was also happening even in the pre-globalization era. There was poverty even in the pre-globalization era. There were social issues like religion and caste in the pre-globalization era. There was agriculture distress in the pre-globalization era. All of this, there is an element of continuity in this, and despite globalization, this has not changed. What are the elements which have not changed? You can talk about poverty, agriculture distress, social issues, religion, caste, urban-rural divide, rising inequalities. All of this you can talk about in the element of continuity in globalization. So, our answer does not end over there. We can bring in a way forward. How do you bring in the benefits of globalization? Now, globalization has also brought in certain negatives. You can also talk about that. You can talk about the present coronavirus pandemic, which has happened because of globalization. The large connectivity between the countries has actually made spread the virus all across the world. So that is a problem you can talk about. The large increasing e-commerce websites and everything has made consumerism more rampant across the world. This has led to many health disorders like obesity and even mental issues like depression or anorexia. So you can say all of that is negative aspect of globalization. But our idea is not to go just deeply inside the negative aspects of globalization. We just discussed how the key demand of the question was how globalization has brought an element of change, how globalization has, how there is an element of continuity in the Indian way of life despite globalization. So please understand, the question is not about globalization. It is just asking how globalization has brought an element of change, but there is also an element of continuity to the Indian way of life when the globalization has occurred. So we must address both sides of the question. Once you address that, if you want, you can go for a way forward. You can say like globalization's benefits need to be transferred to the rural level. There must be a percolation to the bottom levels of the grassroots level of the society. You can talk about the advantage which technology offers. You can talk about digital revolution which can be brought about in the rural areas so that they can all access the benefits of globalization. And you can even quote case studies, methods like Project Loon of Google, which aims to provide internet connectivity to remote places, or the Bharatmala project, or maybe something like the BharatNet project. Bharatmala, which brings road connectivity. BharatNet project, which brings broadband connectivity to all the village panchayats all across India. So you can talk about all of that, and with that you can say that globalization will help for India, bring India together, bring about a unified and a more integral India, India which is of more integrity. No, I'm sorry, an India which has more unity and integrity, and at the same time retaining its diversity, and this will lead to a much more developed India. You can end something on such a positive note, and that would be the perfect answer. So I'll again reiterate in the introduction, give a definition of globalization, link it with how it is a change and how it's still continuing. In the body, just give a small paragraph about what is globalization, 2 or 3 lines how globalization happened in India, then talk about how what are the elements of change that has been brought in because of globalization, what are the elements of continuity which are still present even in the pre-globalization era and in the post-globalized era. Talk about that. We've talked about the major points. We've talked about the major points in both sides. Conclude by saying way forward how we can make sure that the benefits reach all across the country, how we can reduce the defects or any inequalities which come up, what can we do to overcome them, and then end it on a positive note. That is how you can conclude this answer. So that is all for this explanation. This is CB Joy signing off. You all have a nice day. Thank you.